Hello again, this is Richard Wright with Software Bisque, and welcome to part 6, the final installment of our video introduction to the TheSky LTI's technical preview. We've covered setting up your gear, initializing your imaging system, how to get focused, activate and use ProTrack with T-Point, and how to take and examine individual images. Now it's time to put LTI to work for us with potentially an all-night imaging run. Okay, so here we are. Once you've connected to our hardware, LTI comes to life, and we can find our way to the Take Series Toolbox tab. In the last video, we covered finding and getting on your target and taking a single image. Now it's time to set up a whole series of images so you can stack your subs later with your favorite post-processing software to make those beautiful low-noise images. If you're coming from the TheSky Professional, you'll note that the Take Series interface here is a bit different than what you're used to. Only a single series step is displayed at a time, and a navigation bar at the bottom allows you to move back and forth through the series steps, add or duplicate steps, delete steps, or save and load an entire Take Series sequence from disk. The layout for a series step is simple enough. Just work your way from top to bottom, selecting the parameters for each exposure, starting with frame time, the exposure time, delay, and bin mode. The filter and mode boxes are only visible if you have a filter wheel and if your camera has various exposure modes, such as high speed or quality downloads. Okay, so let's set up a simple RGB imaging sequence. So my frame type is going to be light. We can also select to do bias darks or flats, or insert a focus run in the middle of our series as well. There's a quick drop down for commonly used exposure times. This is really nice on a touch screen so that you don't have to bring up the keyboard, but you can select the edit field and type in any number you want. The same thing for delay if you want to add a delay. Your binning mode, this is read from the camera, and the filter. So in this case, sorry, I'm using the simulator, which has an inordinate number of filters. I select the red filter. And let's say I want to take 9 exposures, and I might have some mode on my camera like a high-speed mode or with or without RBI or something like that, depending on my camera model. If it's a DSLR, I could actually change ISO for the camera as well. And so I could set the number of times I want to expose, say 9 times, and I can't move forward or backwards because there's only one there. Now I can create another empty one and do all of this again. 5 minutes, no delay. Let's do a blue exposure. No, let's do a green exposure and also do that 9 times. But I can also duplicate the image, the series, and it'll create a third one. It's the same. So if I go back and forth, you can see I've got red, green, and then another green. Well, let's just change that to blue, shall we? And so now I have three series set up. Well, 3 series set up, yes. So I'm going to do 9 exposures of red. The next step is going to do 9 exposures of green, and the next step is going to do 9 exposures of blue. I can also set up the entire series and tell it to repeat, say twice. So I'll get eventually 18 red, green, and blue, but it's going to go through 9 at a time. Now, if you want to go round robin, say you have filter, focuser, offsets, or you're doing, or perhaps your filters are actually parfocal, you could set up and have your exposures so that you do. Let's go back to the beginning and say we do 1 red and 1 green and 1 blue. I'd already changed that, and then just tell the series to repeat 15 times. Well, I want more than that. Well, that's fine. You can say do 18 exposures, and now I'll get 1 red, 1 green, 1 blue, 1 red, 1 green, 1 blue, and it'll just do that over and over until it's done each filter 18 times. If dithering is turned on, let's go there. You check this to turn dithering on and off. And you can set the dither side, the step size in arc seconds, either pre-programmed or type 1 in, of course, and also add a settle time between dither steps if you like. What happens is the mount is moved a slight amount, the dither amount, between each exposure during the taking of the series. Dither moves are skipped if the filter has changed, since there's no need to dither exposures unless you're using the same filter. For example, if you're taking 9 red exposures in a row, you want the dither operation to occur between each exposure. But if you're doing RGB, you really only need to perform the dither at the end of the RGB sequence. There's no need to dither between red and green exposures, for example. I recommend dithering by slightly more than your pixel scale if you're using a monochrome camera, and by about 6 times your pixel scale for one-shot color cameras in order to account for the Bayer matrix interpolation that goes on when we colorize those images. If the target crosses the meridian during an exposure, the mount will actually automatically do the meridian flip. Since paramounts can easily track up to 2 hours past the meridian, LTI does not pause just before a meridian flip and wait for the object to cross. It just keeps imaging until it crosses the meridian, and then once it's past the meridian, it'll do the flip before it starts the next image. For the first release of the technical preview, we rely on T-Point's excellent pointing performance to place you back on target after the meridian flip. For focal lengths of 1,000 millimeters or less, this is usually more than sufficient, even with a small model, especially since we don't need exact to-the-pixel placement to acquire a particular guide star after we swap sides. In the future, I may add a closed-loop slew or photographic verification to this step, but I want to see if early adopters really find this necessary. In testing with several different focal lengths, I really haven't found this to be necessary, and I think it just adds additional time that may not be needed, but we'll see. So let me say something additionally about when you add a focus step to a series. The series step that has an at focus run in it, some of the options disappear. The focus step will use the same camera mode that you used on the Get Focus tab, and of course your exposure time needs to be set manually. This will remember the region of interest that you set on the Get Focused tab. So if you set an area of interest, it'll just remember it here when you tell it to take a series. Remember, if you're watching these videos out of order, at focus 3 does not need to slew off to a particular star. It does in-place focus, potentially of your entire frame if you need to, or of a region of interest. If you have a region of interest selected, when the meridian flip occurs, there's no guarantee that we can just simply move that region of interest up or down and it's going to line up precisely. So what happens is the software actually uses the last image taken after the meridian flip, and it analyzes that and finds the area in the interest of highest contrast. And then it'll create the subframe around that area of highest contrast. It's just like the option in at focus 3 to auto set the focus subframe. It actually just looks at the image and figures out a good place to automatically set that region of interest. And the only reason really to do a region of interest is if you have sparse data in the frame to begin with, or perhaps to speed up the focus because it takes a long time to download an entire frame from the camera. So one last thing, as the great Steve Jobs used to say, there is a target selection for take series. So each step of the series could actually be a different object. Obviously you can select current, a little bug there I'll have to clean up. What that does, current just says don't make any changes, stay where you are. Naturally maybe dithering as well, but current just says don't move. But if you select a target for one of the series steps, it'll actually slew to that target before it begins taking the next set of images. It does do a photographic verification or closed loop slew when it slews to that target, and you could actually bounce back and forth between targets all night if you wanted to, or you could set up a series so that you acquire, say, a couple of hours on one object and then go to another object to collect a couple of hours. Now the objects listed in the target dropdown have to be searched for and verified by select target. So these are objects that we know are real targets, and every time you search for an object here, let's say I want to search for the Horsehead Nebula. There we go, we found that, and now the Horsehead Nebula of course will show up as one of the valid targets that I can select. Now LTI doesn't make any provision to make sure the target is visible, so don't select targets that are below the horizon. So you're kind of on your own if the target is not visible. The TheSky LTI is not meant as a full-featured planning package. It's not meant to replace any of the high-end automation programs. There are plenty of other third-party apps for that purpose, and we do have another product in development that will fit that need later, and you can be reasonably confident it's going to integrate well with the TheSky LTI as well. But this really is designed, again, for hands-on imagers. Sit down, image one or two or maybe three objects a night, and you're ready to go. Finally, when you start a series, it will display an estimated time remaining for the series. So in this case, I'm setting up 9 exposures in a RGB round robin fashion, and this is only an estimate, and it will update from time to time. It actually measures how long it takes to rotate the filter wheel or to do focus steps if you have focus steps installed. It doesn't try to estimate how long a meridian flip will last. So, bear in mind it's a rough estimate, but it does give you some idea of how long you're going to be imaging for this series. I'm going to forestall an email right now by saying I think building this dynamically as you create the series is a good idea too, and probably before the tech review is done, or this is a product that'll be in there as well. It's not that difficult to build it on the fly and show it early. And well, that's it. The TheSky LTI is the start of a whole new era for software Bisque, we hope. And this technology preview is but the tip of the iceberg for what we have planned down the road. So stay tuned, enjoy, give us some feedback, and clear skies, everybody.